Alrighty. Cool. Next slide. Alrighty. Welcome everyone to RMIT University's Google Developer Student Club's Geeky Google Tech Talks. First and foremost, I will tell you guys what we're doing today. So, the Googlers from Google are going to do the lightning talks, and then we're going to do a Q&A, and then we will mingle. Next. Oh, yes. We should probably tell you guys about our core team before we start everything, because they are literally the people who made everything happen. So, as you all probably know, it showed up. I am the Developer Student Club lead starting this semester, and our event managers are Cheryl, Jason, Sadid, design experts who actually made these beautiful slides, Andrea, Isaac, and Jackie, and tech expert is PK, and our social media officer is Charm. And next. And now, introducing the main event, the Googlers! Woo! First up, we've got Katie, who is a Senior Developer Relations Engineer, and Brett, who is a Developer Relations Engineer at Dart and Flutter. And then we've got Craig, who is a Technical Writer. And now for the Lightning Talks. First up, we've got Katie.
Hello, I'm Katie. You have so much energy, I now need to reflect that. Okay, so each of us are going to be going through a little bit about how we got to Google, what we do day to day, and sneaky cool project stuff, which we didn't put on the slides, so not even the organizers know. So, my journey, I got a degree in a Bachelor of IT from Griffith. I'm sorry, it's not a cool university, but I still have an IT degree, which is kind of neat. Before I joined Google, I did around 12 years of different IT-related jobs, some software development, some system administration, some SRE. But around that time, my little dotted lines fork off because I started to get into community events. There aren't many cameras on, so I will try this. How many people have gone to a community event before for like Python, Ruby? I think RMIT had a Apple one on their campuses in a couple of years. Yes, community events are great. They're normally really cheap and they're normally volunteer run, which means you can help out with things. This might be a community event we're at right now. But I happen to help organize one called PyCon, which has $10 tickets if you want to come along, and I'm dropping a link in the chat because I can. But the reason I'm mentioning this is I got into my role based on going to events like this. The person that introduced me to that there was a role at Google, I met at an event 3 years before, and we'd stayed in touch over social media, and one day they're like, hey, we have a job opening. Most of my jobs, except for one, I think had been from, hey, are you looking for something? We have this job. One was from Seek. Networking is really great for trying to find roles, in my experience. But now I'm at Google. Been here for about 2 years. I recently got promoted, so I like using the Senior Developer Relations Engineer title wherever I can. It's really cool because I can tell my mum I'm a senior engineer at Google, and I don't have to explain what my job is because that sounds cool. But you're all here, I'll explain what my job is anyway. Most of my job is developer advocacy, and what that is day to day is so different. Just today, what have I been doing? I've been listening to internship presentations. I've been hacking around on Git. I've been trying to get build pipelines working. I'm presenting at this really cool Google Developer Student Club event. I learned a lot about how Canva works. I did some reports for some things. And that's just today. Yesterday was different. The day before was different again. I tried to write down all the different kinds of things that I do, and I didn't have enough space. A lot of what developer advocacy is advocating for developers, not to developers, for developers. If I go out to an event and I present some tech, I stick around in the hallway and people come to me, or I find people and we just chat about things. They bring me their grievances, they bring me things they like, and then I end up bringing that information back to the engineers and the product teams, and we help make things better. At the moment, not a lot of that happening. Little illness around the world for a little bit, so everyone's at home. But I still get to do this sort of stuff. So most of the things I've been doing since not being able to travel is being the zeroth customer, which is ZEROTH, zeroth. I get to play with a lot of the things at Google before anyone else publicly does. So I get to build stuff with them. I get to see if they break. I get to try the weird little edge cases, and I actually make demo things. One of the demos that I've been working on, cool project alert, I have a tutorial coming up that lets you detect different dogs in your uploads, and it'll tell you, oh, there are 2 dogs. There is a pug and there is a Scottish Terrier. And I built that by clipping together different bits of Google Cloud, and I found some weird edge cases along the way. So I reported those bugs, and some of them are now fixed. And that's cool, because if I get frustrated, you don't have to, because I'll go and fix it, because that's my job. What else have I got in there? Yeah, no 2 days are the same. Get to do cool things like record videos for like Google I/O, which was just on. Got to do some interesting things at that event. But cool projects I'm working on. Googlers can choose to have 20% projects, where you can do a project that's related to Google but doesn't have to be related to your job. So I'm working with the University of Vermont over in the US, and we're doing some really interesting work to do with the science of networking complicated systems together as networks of people. And it sounds really nerdy, because it is. I've gotten published in Nature, the scientific journal. I'm that much of a nerd. That's my lightning talk. Next slide, please, because it's now over to Brett. Hi, Brett.
Hi, Katie. I even unmuted myself. Oh my God, technology, isn't it amazing? Next slide. There we go. I just realized I should have had a kink in my curve as well. The reality of the matter is, as much as this line here that says I did Bachelor of Computer Science, and then I spent 10 years in consulting, and then 10 years at Google, this looks all neat and planned, and like this was my mission all along. And the reality of the matter is, if there was going to be a line, it would be more of a squiggle, probably with a whole bunch of loopbacks and a whole bunch of questioning whether I am doing what I'm supposed to be doing. Because the reality of the matter is, and Craig is probably going to throw things at me for this, but I'm a frustrated author who just happens to enjoy writing code. And it turns out that I have yet to find my real day job. I just currently do this because it pays well. And in the meantime, I am slowly but surely finding my voice by writing code labs and tutorials and all that sort of thing. So being able to say, as someone who's worked in this industry for way too long, that this was planned from the start is sort of like, oh no. So yes, just trying to put it out there. Life is what happens while you're still figuring out what you're trying to do. So that's sort of the number one takeaway from my path to here. It doesn't make sense, and that's okay. The other thing I want to point out is, as all of you are, I'm assuming a lot of you have dialed into this to go, how do I get a job at Google? The first part is be interesting and be interested. So what do I mean by that? Interesting is be someone who has a real story and you do real things. Katie has an avocado there and there's a story behind that. So, and so on and so forth. Everyone at Google has some interesting things about them that they're diving into, be it cooking or beer making or electronics, that sort of thing. And what do I mean by the other half of that? Interested. A lot of being at Google is being able to dive deep into something. By this I mean be a geek, right? I'm not just talking about dive deep into comics, though that will help with certain conversations you have to have with SREs. But it also means being able to just dive deep into the technology stack that we work on here at Google, because it's a strange, weird amalgamation of a lot of different technologies that frequently don't make sense until you understand the history of how it got there. It's like, oh, that's why it's stuck together that way. And that's important when you're trying to get things to work, is to understand that everything has a history, everything has a story. And yeah, sometimes you're not the hero of the story, just saying, putting that out there. So it's important when you're attempting to join a company like Google or Twitter or Facebook, is that you bring your whole person and you be real and you be interesting and dive deep. And sort of tying off something that Katie said, how I got my job at Google, strangely enough, was helping out in the community. And that got noticed by people and they went, this guy, he's helping with this little app engine thing that we're trying to roll along. Maybe we should talk to him. And they did, and they went, maybe you want to, join this team and you can promote things. And I did that like 10 years ago, and I'm still here, which is hilarious because until Google, I basically stayed in roles for a year, maybe 18 months before I got bored. And I went, when I joined Google, it's like in 18 months I'll be out, I'll be doing something else. And I'm still waiting for that 18 months to like finally time out. But 10 years later, I'm still sort of like, I feel like I've only been here for a year. It's just been a very long year, which kind of makes sense with COVID, right? And that's me rambling, and I've kind of run out of things to ramble. So Craig, your slide.
Perfect. So firstly, apologies for going full Twitch with the colored lighting. Reality is it's absolute subterfuge for the fact that there's laundry all over my floor. It's been a really hard lockdown. My name's Craig. I am a technical writer at Google. And when I talk to people, they usually don't know what technical writing is, or they don't know what a technical writer does. So I thought I'd take a few moments to talk to you about what makes a technical writer, what we do, and perhaps how to get a career in technical writing if that's something that you're interested in. So usually when people ask me, like say my dentist, when they already have 14 things in my mouth and decide I can answer a question, hey, what do you do for a living? I say, well, look, I write help documentation for a very small software company you probably haven't heard of. And the reality is that, yes, that is the mainstay of being a technical writer. You are writing documentation to help a user achieve a task, but that is the end goal there. There's a lot that goes into getting to that point, a lot of hard and soft skills. For example, I am a developer documentation technical writer, which means not only do I need to be able to write things well, but I need to be able to understand and work with code and to run it and work with APIs and be able to stitch bits of cloud together and to make it make sense. And, technology never breaks, of course. So, you have to present that coherent thing from going from a very complicated situation to a very simple explanation to your audience about how to execute on something. And so there are a lot of hard skills that go into that, but there are also a lot of soft skills as well. For instance, as a technical writer, quite often you're launched into a completely unfamiliar situation, software that you have never seen before, and they're like, cool, can you write documentation about this? Okay, yay. So now we get to be that 0th customer that Katie spoke about. We get to be the first person that sees this thing, play with it, break it, file bugs, tell the product team where they made things harder to use than they had to. But we also have to be able to speak to product designers and product managers and engineers and be able to speak their language to be able to get something to a point where our customers can start using things. Now, yes, we create that documentation at the end, but quite often it goes beyond just being helpful for people to be able to use products. For example, in my last job, our sales department said, hey, our marketing stuff, no one actually knows what our product does. So we show them your documentation so they understand all the different features. So it can be used as a sales thing as well. And quite often throughout, when we're creating these things, we start building things like UX skills and interpersonal skills and support skills. And we are more than happy to argue the benefit of the Oxford comma along the way. As you slowly develop skills as a technical writer, you start to touch so many things that people actually start looking at other fields like product management, like software engineering, like product design. But the reality is that goes the other way as well. So for instance, I used to be a technology journalist, and that gave me enough skills to kind of go sideways into technical writing. But my manager used to be a lawyer, and my former manager worked in radio. And there are so many software engineers who said, you know what, I'm kind of done with this coding thing, but I still love technology and I want to write about it. And so within Google, quite a few software engineers have come across and said, talk to me about technical writing. It is a fascinating field in that we try to write for everyone, which is absolutely impossible when people speak different languages, but we do our best. And so what this means is whether we need to write accessible content for people from many different backgrounds, they might speak English as a second language, so we have to simplify the language to a certain degree. We also have to think about people who might be reading using a screen reader or other assistive technologies like that. As a result of all of this, the way that we write, sometimes we have to strip a bit of personality from it. You can't really afford to be funny as a technical writer. Maybe this is why I'm trying to make up for it now in this talk. But basically, I love this quote from Kurt Vonnegut, who basically says, technical writers are trained to reveal almost nothing about themselves in their writing. This makes them freaks in the world of writers, since almost all the other ink-stained wretches in that world reveal a lot about themselves to the reader. And the reality is we have set guides and guidelines about the way we write things, so it's just incredibly accessible for people to read. Now, how do you become a technical writer? Well, look, there's no formal process. There's no degree that you can avail yourself of. As Brett mentioned, this is sort of something that I kind of just sort of fell into. You end up amalgamating a whole bunch of skills together to get to where you are. Having said that, there are meetups you can go to. There's a great meetup called Write the Docs, where you can start learning about how to become a technical writer. There is a group called STC, which is a little bit more stodgy and old school, but it might be somewhere where you can start. Where you find technical writers out there in the world, well, the reality is that you need a fairly big company to be able to support technical writers. Very small startups usually have more critical roles to begin with. But the smallest company I've been in has been in a company of 80. I'm in a slightly bigger company now, so we have a lot more technical writers than we did at that other company. And they tend to be these days pretty software oriented. Having said that, I have met a technical writer who writes about cement. I don't know what he writes about cement, but he does. Atlassian calls them content designers. So you can also see us called content designers, although that tends to have a little bit of a UX bent to it. And as a splinter offshoot, you might also see us referred to as instructional designers. It's a slightly different role. It's a little more illustrative, but it's all about educating the user and taking them on a journey to be able to use products successfully. So that is a very brief overview of technical writing. It takes a lot of technical skills, a lot of interpersonal skills, a lot of soft skills and knowledge and adaptability. But if I manage to get your interest in any way about it, I'm more than happy to answer questions after the session. So thank you so much for listening.
So I suppose I should talk here because that was the reason why this slide exists. But, you know, Craig and Katie, feel free to jump in and correct me because, you know, I have imposter syndrome, so I'm guaranteed that whatever I say here is at least partially wrong. It's important for all of you to understand when you're applying at a place like Google is that if you feel like you're an imposter, that's actually a core requirement for the role because you're effectively jumping. An anecdote from when I first joined Google 10 years ago, my then manager said to me, joining Google is like jumping onto a moving train and holding on for dear life. And it will be like that for the entire time you're at Google. The reason for that, and it's a simple one, is that when you join up to a place like Google, you are drinking from the fire hose. that is all of the changes. I spend 4 hours a day just reading emails to find out what's going on in my area of interest, in and around me in the company, what's happening in various layers that I depend on. So stepping back 2 steps, I support a little programming language called Dart and a UA toolkit called Flutter. It's a way of making apps for mobile phones and for websites and now desktop, which means that I need to understand things like, how does Windows UI work? How does Linux UI work? How does Android and iOS app development work? And the minute I start going out on stage and talking about this stuff, I'll get someone asking about, okay, how does it interface to C++ on this, little interface device that I've got running here that's running some random real-time operating system. So like, I've got no idea, but I have to say something because I'm on a stage surrounded by 200 people. So yes, if you want to work at a large company, sort of grabbing hold of that imposter syndrome and using it to drive you on to learn more stuff is important. Do not, for whatever you do, hold back because you feel like you're an imposter. Please just keep driving forward. That's kind of what I wanted to get to here. Katie, did you want to add anything, Craig?
Ray, Brett, and I know a great number of things, but our Venn diagrams only overlap in some little areas. The great thing about working at such a large company is that you do not have to know everything. I know stuff that Craig and Brett doesn't know. Craig and Brett know stuff that I don't know. Like, there is so much knowledge that you can learn from each other, which means that you do not have to rely on learning it all yourself, which means you are allowed to be dumb and ask questions. Asking questions is a really big deal as well. Like, we have entire internal clones of Stack Overflow specifically created so engineers can ask engineers other questions. Like, you aren't expected to know everything, and that's by design. That helps me with the imposter syndrome. Also, the fact that I wasn't on camera before and now I am. I have a large avocado plushie behind me because I'm a developer advocate. And avocado sounds like advocate. That's the only reason I have a giant plushie avocado. Also, you used to be able to get these at Target. So, these are normally really expensive from the US, but it's actually squishable. And that you can get them at Target. Or Target, my apologies. But yeah, like each of the three of us, I'm going to guess the fact that this is a university event, we are significantly older than the people in this room, which means that we have many, many years of professional experience that we draw on every day for each of our roles. You will get there. You will become the old, grizzled, bearded, super dork in the corner that knows so much about your little thing. You will get there. It's okay. But be yourself, be bold, and nerd out, because it's cool. Nerds rule. Yeah. Come on, Craig. Tell me I'm wrong.
No, you're absolutely right. And in saying that, I was saying to Katie and Brett before we joined in, I have my own imposter syndrome presenting today. I'm like, all these guys are currently studying and they know so much more than I do because I forget all of that stuff. They're going to ask me a hard question, help. But Katie's absolutely right. Confidence is key to be able to ask those questions. When I first joined Google, I was introduced to somebody and they said, oh yeah, by the way, this is the co-creator of Tetris. And I'm like, what? Tetris? But after you get over that, you realize that you can schedule a coffee with the co-creator of Tetris and they're just a person and they will tell you what you want to know. And it's really cool. So confidence is key. Be happy to say, I have no idea about this, but I'm going to find out. It is probably a key role in what I do every day. It's like, explain it to me like I'm 6, and then I get all the information I need. That's all I have to say.
I kind of realized that I might have goofed a bit here and that I didn't actually describe my role playing into the whole imposter thing. So I probably should do that. So just to put it in context, Katie is developer advocate. That's the avocado. And Katie does a lot of time making presentations. Craig's a tech writer. He comes up with the words. And I'm an engineer sitting in the middle trying to come up with software that helps advocates go on stage and helps tech writers have something to talk about. So you can sort of think of me as a software engineer who's gone rogue. And what do I mean by gone rogue? I spent 10 years in the industry writing software for companies for hire, working at a bunch of different places. Then I came to Google and I started teaching people how to use APIs, how to use the code that we generate. And that leads into, okay, how do we write documentation for it? How do we present it so that people are actually interested? So it's sort of, I sit at sort of in the middle somewhere fuzzy. I do a little bit of tech writing, a little bit of presenting, a whole lot of samples. And I know that sounds kind of vague, and it kind of is, but Katie and Craig have both mentioned a core concept that's central to the DevRel mission, and it's this thing called the zeroth customer. And I actually just did a Google search and I realized it's probably a Google internal term. I don't see any good references externally. I've got one for internal people. I can just send people to a Google Doc. And one of the guys that I used to work with has written up this beautiful 5-page screed on, this is what DevRel is about. It's about being the developer that gets in there and tries to use the API and figures out it doesn't work for this core use case. And so that's kind of what we do. We figure out how to make things work, or if they don't work, explain why they don't work or why they don't make sense. The interesting question is, taking a step back, why is that important to a company like Google? And the simple truth of the matter is, marketing to nerds is hard. You try to tell nerds what they like and they don't like, and they'll tell you to go get stuffed. Sorry, I'm Australian. I will use Australianisms. But if you show them that there's this really cool thing you can do with it, they'll lean forward and get interested. So yeah, it's kind of back to front in that to market to technical people, you've got to give them a technical reason to be technically interested. And that's kind of what we do. I hope that makes sense. Please correct me where I've goofed or haven't made sense, or if you need more explanation, please ask away in the comments.
Yes, and one tiny thing that I needed to bring up earlier, and I completely lost the link, and now I found it again. DevRel. So we're all developer relations. We have different roles, but we're all developer relations. Developer relations is just software engineering with good bedside manner. That's all I wanted to say.
I miss being in the office with these guys. It hurts.